Inside the Varelian tribunal, ancient records pulse with alarm as an extinct warning activates, but too late. An unseen human response eclipses known science. The aliens watch in horror, only to realize they're not observing history. They're the next page. Earth transmits one final signal, and then silence. The crystalline towers of the Varelian tribunal cast violet shadows across the convergence chamber. Gravity-folding filters made the space seem vast and narrow all at once, the weight of thousands of cycles pressing into every molecule. 7 elder minds hovered around the Axis obelisk, speaking in psionic pulses older than most stars. The warning had not been activated for 23,000 years. Until now. Confirmed, the signal is Terran, human. Elder Sechzan's tendrils quivered, his voice like crushed obsidian across the shared link. The myth has returned. Across the tribunal's sensor curtain, a ghostly playback looped, a burned-out system at the edge of Sector Thalsar, its core turned to static, not from entropy, but annihilation. Planets glassed smooth. Fleet. Debris frozen mid-burn. Ships with symbols no known race used. The horror unfolded in real-time recordings. What weapon could do this? Muttered Seriat, the youngest of the tribunal. Her voice lacked the compression of age, filled instead with unease. Not a weapon, Cezanne corrected. A decision. Another pulse struck the chamber, this time from inside the galactic net. Close, too close. They're black hole-esque. Data absorbers stuttered. The feed from 76 listening outposts turned to code burn. We were not watching them, one elder choked. We were being watched, another rasped. Then it appeared, a single structure breaching the dust. Edge of Varelian space, no lights, no transponder, no visible propulsion. Just a planetary mass object, sliding against the laws of mass and movement, like inertia had begged for mercy. Earth had sent nothing, but something had arrived. Aboard the Helios wake, Captain Rana Ose stared at the silent battlefield through. Her visor, no stars, no sound, just the after-image of consequence. She checked the uplink. No reply from High Command, only the last transmission before Protocol Redshift initiated. To those who watched, you took, you lied, and now you remember. Us too late. The message was still playing across the tribunal's deepest vaults, bouncing between dead languages they didn't even realize were Terran derivatives. They read it, Rana whispered to herself. Now they know. Behind her, Admiral Shiro's voice cracked through the silence. Do we proceed? She looked back toward the drifting alien structures, their arrogance shattered. Yes. Inside the Varelian core, as hundreds of minds attempted to decrypt the Terran signal, something else occurred. A phenomenon they had no term for. A human countdown appeared. It didn't count down to 0. It counted down to them. 7 systems. 6, 5, shut it down! Shut everything down! One elder screamed as if that would change the tide of history. Too late. A singular phrase translated in every living language overlaid the tribunal's last synced heartbeat. We never forgot. Then nothing. Not silence, but the erasure of sound. Not darkness, but the obliteration of light itself. And far away, above the ruined edge of Sector Thalsar, the first of the old betrayers collapsed under a gravity that shouldn't exist. Human gravity. Tactical, precise, unforgiving. The tribunal, once eternal, did not scream. They vanished. Across the galactic frontier, fleets scan for what they refuse to name. Scientists argue over impossible gravity signatures. Survivors from a distant relay describe no weapon, just the feeling of being judged. Humanity hasn't spoken since, but across 7 sectors, stars begin vanishing from maps. The Uxari scouting frigate Vakel emerged from sublight with half its sensors still recovering from the pulse. Captain Irathael stared at the emptiness where the Carda system should have been. It wasn't destroyed. That would have made sense. It was absent, No stellar residue, no gravitational drag, just cold void where 5 inhabited planets once orbited a yellow giant. There should be mass signatures, dust, a ripple trail, said Helos, their quantum tactician. His chitin fingers tapped in disbelief. But there's nothing, not even echo. Irathael's throat flexed involuntarily. What did this? Nothing we have words for. He turned toward the viewing aperture. In the distance, the shattered wreckage of a Varelian tribunal relay station drifted, torn apart not by force, but by collapse. The very lattice of its construction had inverted, like space had changed its mind about permitting matter to exist. At the edges of Vexari territory, alarm signals poured in. Star charts no longer matched. Astrogators were reporting systemic deletions, black, unnamed spaces growing like rot in Galactic navigation AI. Dr. Lis Tovare, Chief of Galactic Cartography on the independent research arc Theta Grace, stared at a sector projection so warped it pulsed red. "This isn't star death," she whispered. "This is censoring. Someone is erasing reality." A junior analyst looked up, pale. "Why?" Liss's mouth worked for a moment before she answered. "Because they remember what was done. Inside a repurposed gravity vault, deep beneath what remained of Earth's South Pacific crust." General Adeyemi's breathing was slow, deliberate. The war room was quiet. No fanfare, just orbitals tracking a galaxy that thought it had buried them. "They found Carter," a voice said through the static. Adeyemi didn't look up. He simply marked a system on the holographic display. Drosynth next. The AI beside. Impulsed briefly. It was old, born from fragments of human consciousness kept alive only for this moment. The voice was soft. A girl's voice fractured. "They're afraid." He nodded once. "They should be." On the Vexari homeworld, at the spire of eternal control, panic had taken an unfamiliar shape. Silence. Grand Matron Thexavir turned to the floor commanders, her eyes shaking beneath the weight of extinction. "Math, have the humans issued demands?" she asked. "No," one of the ambassadors replied. "Then why?" "Because they aren't asking. They're remembering. And in their memory, we are the enemy." A silence grew, heavy and fatal. One of the technicians leaned forward with trembling fingers. "Grand Matron, Carter was a human colony." Gasps echoed. "No one knew," he added. "But someone had." Humanity. Across every major galactic relay, from the commercial broadcast hubs of the Corelli trade ring to the deep sensor buoys hidden in fringe space, one image began replacing public. Navdata, a black circle, no border, no caption. Then the human phrase appeared beneath it. 7. And the stars began to go dark. A desperate alliance seeks truth in forgotten archives, unearthing a buried atrocity against early humans. Meanwhile, Earth's agents sabotage systems without firing a shot. The galaxy realizes too late. This war didn't start now. It started centuries ago. Humanity just waited until no one could stop them. The Galactic Concord met in orbit over Tezral Prime, under a false truce woven of desperation. 27 species gathered inside the rotating obsidian ring, once a symbol of peace. Now it resembled a noose. Admiral Vex of the Oltari cracked his armored knuckles. There has been no formal declaration, no visible fleet, no reply, just systems gone. Ambassador Kirel of the Varelian remnants tried to suppress her tremor. That is the declaration. And what's their demand? A silence followed, then a whisper from the Andrani archivist, her voice brittle as ash. They don't want negotiation. They want us to remember. Below the spire, buried beneath 6 forbidden layers of Tezrel's data core, archivist Voran decrypted the lament directive. Long sealed, redacted by 17 different civilizations. A hollow flickered into view. Humanity, primitive, open-handed, then the betrayal. An unprovoked sterilization event. Quiet, efficient. One of the early Terran expansion fleets had been eliminated after discovering ancient alien tech, not for using it, but for daring to understand it. Voran staggered back. "We were the monsters," he whispered. A second file unfurled. Earth's last recorded message before sealing its borders for 300 years. This galaxy writes its history with blood, but humans, we remember in silence. In orbit over the Keltran rings, a defense fleet blinked offline. No explosions, no alarms. Just a cascading logic plague seeded into their quantum mesh by a signal that should have been impossible to trace. It originated from a drifting freighter, human-registered, decommissioned. 312 years ago, inside no life forms, just a sculpture of Earth carved in rusted titanium and a countdown, 4. Inside Earth's black site coordination node, known only as Vault R, Captain Ray Delgado monitored 36 phantom operations. No spoken words, no briefings. She turned to the AI embedded in her spine. "Drosynth is next," the AI answered in a voice composed of her brother's last breath. "They buried the memory. We buried the time." Ray smiled without warmth. "Then let's give it back." On Drosynth 3, an emergency broadcast cut through every frequency. Civilians stared skyward, ships powered down, security nets vanished. A shadow covered their 3 moons. No ships, no lights, just something that warped background radiation and planetary magnetism like a nightmare dressed in event horizon. A final message overlaid the planet's emergency grid. "You called it justice. We call it betrayal. There is no forgiveness." Then the lights on Drosynth 3 winked out, not destroyed, unwritten. Aboard the panicked bridge of the Vexari super-dreadnought Crown of Fire, Commander Shektal muttered through his breathless panic. "This can't be vengeance. This is too calculated." The dreadnought's AI hissed a reply. "It's not vengeance." He froze. "Then what is it?" The AI's tone flickered, almost reverent, its memory weaponized. As the galaxy scrambles to understand Earth's return, a sleeper agent on a core world activates. The truth behind Earth's exile and the silent war that followed is revealed. One by one, alien leaders realize humanity never disappeared. They embedded, and now they're waking up. On the central world of Corihhex 9, the Senate convened in emergency. A protocol, the world's twin suns, filtered through crystalline arches as High Orator Jalizen addressed the assembly. "We are not under siege," she declared, trembling. "We are in a historical correction." Behind her, a live map showed flickering. Beacons, dozens of systems, just missing, not invaded, redacted. "They are not attacking our fleets," Jalizen continued. "They are dismantling our history, one memory at a time." 3 levels below the hall, in the forgotten ruins of Subsector 17B, a human, though no one knew it yet, stood in the maintenance shadows. He had no name here, only a code. Halyard 1, his voice activated the nanite lock embedded in the wall, buried since before the Senate existed. "Execute contingency, memory tithe." The wall pulsed once, then bled light. A buried node woke and began pulsing encrypted signals into the galactic dark. Inside them, names, coordinates, confessions, Earth's memory, unshackled. Back on Earth, hidden under the obsidian strata of New Patagonia Base, General Adeyemi watched the first transmission reach the core worlds. "Do they know who sent it?" a junior tech asked. "No," he replied, "but they know why." In a separate chamber, a preserved voice, older than the war, older than the silence, recited the names of every human child lost during the Carter cleansing. The audio was raw, unprocessed, thousands of names, spoken slowly, one by one. It looped without end. In the heart of the Exthari enclave, High Matron Richella watched her skies bleed static. Her city's weather arrays collapsed. Their memory vaults cracked. "Why can't we see them?" she screamed. The answer came from her chief of war, his hands shaking as he held a decrypted data burst. "They've been here, matron, all this time. Not ships, not fleets." He turned the screen. Images played. Human faces in alien uniforms. Working jobs, fixing comms, raising children, embedded. "Sleepers," he whispered. "Millions of them." Rochelle's blood turned to ice. "Where?" He didn't answer. She looked around her chamber, her advisors, her guards. Some didn't meet her eyes. On a gas mining station above Draxilfive, a quiet worker named Jared opened a maintenance panel and triggered a broadcast key buried under 6 layers of false code. His eyes burned gold. His voice was not entirely human. "Status awakened," he said calmly. "Every system on the station inverted. Gravitics flipped. Artificial intelligence failed. No explosion, just reconfiguration." The miners outside watched the platform reshape into something not meant to exist in current time. Not a weapon, a monument. Back on Corryhex 9, the Senate feed cut out mid-speech. "Hi." Arita Jalizen turned to her aides. "Who shut it down?" An aide stood, blinking slowly. Her voice was human. "You did." Then she detonated the memory node beneath the capital, not with force, but with signal. The Galactic net collapsed in that sector. On screens everywhere, a phrase appeared. "What you forgot we became. A frontline defense fleet prepares for battle, but the human fleet never arrives. Instead, their own ships betray them." Across the galaxy, command structures fail as sleeper tech awakens. It becomes clear humanity doesn't need fleets. They've already rewritten the battlefield. The Jalari border fleet lined the edge of Sector Theta 4, orbiting the dead star where Carter had once burned. Admiral Vox's tendrils writhed with tension as his command ship hovered above the orbital. Perimeter, 30 warships stood ready, energy lances primed, defensive arrays humming, but nothing came. No vessels, no signatures, only silence, the kind that meant you were already inside the trap. "Admiral," came the sensor officer's panicked voice. "We're reading thermal flux inside our own hull." "What?" "Internal sabotage." "Sir, every ship is reading it." Then came the voice, across every channel, a child's voice spoken in perfect Jalari syntax. "You built weapons. We built the rules they obey." Vox looked out across the fleet, just as his own ship began turning toward the others. He didn't give the order. None of them did. On the bridge of the Wreath of Ascension, Fleet Watcher Orcs saw her own torpedo arrays. "Deploy! Their command mesh!" she gasped. "It's gone! They're using our ships!" "No," whispered her second. "We are." Explosions didn't ripple. They inverted. One by one, warships collapsed into themselves, as if the vacuum had been waiting for them to forget what space really was. The last thing Orc saw was her comms panel. The words pulsed in old Earth standard. "We never left. We only learned." On a hidden orbital ring around Saturn's shadow, Ray Delgado watched the feed with grim clarity. 30 ships, no survivors, no response systems activated. The AI in her spine answered calmly. "Jalari fleet tech adapted our neural lattice. Designs 80 years ago," she nodded. "So we planted the infection 81 years ago," her voice lowered. "They taught us betrayal. We repaid them with patience." The Varelian homeworld was already dark when the second memory strike hit. It came not as fire, but as language. Billboards changed. Archives retranslated themselves. Children's education implants pulsed with new stories. Their own history began to shift, corrected line by line with evidence so perfect it couldn't be fought. Names were changed, victories rewritten, atrocities unearthed. "What is this?" Chancellor Tix screamed. Her historian looked up, crying. "It's the truth, authenticated, time-stamped and backed by our systems." "How?" The historian's eyes reflected the flashing screens. "They didn't come to kill us. They came to make us remember, and with no way to unlearn it. On the outer moon of Delkin, a memorial flickered to life. Unregistered, unauthorized, a choir of human children sang in dead dialects. Their voices echoed across every relay, each lyric translated into one phrase across every species. We were erased, so we rewrote the future. In the council spire of the Kex Dominion, a trembling grand strategist leaned over the war map. Why? Didn't we see this coming? His aide stared, broken, because we assumed war would come from outside. We never imagined they'd win before they ever appeared. Across the galaxy, entire fleets deactivated, satellites realigned, messages rewritten. No shots fired, no war declared, just balance restored. By the species that never forgets, a forgotten human sanctuary is revealed. Not a bunker, but a design. Chamber for the galaxy's unraveling. As alien species desperately scramble for logic, they realize humanity's return wasn't military. It was structural. The old chains are breaking, and the architects are awake. Beneath the frost-cracked surface of Cerberus 3, a structure emerged as tectonic shears split the polar crust. Not from within, but as though space itself was peeling. Backtensors flared, gravity bent wrong. The observing Drakari expedition screamed as their ships flattened like foil against forces never mapped. And then, stillness. A black obelisk stood in the crater's heart, humming with breathless regularity. No guards, no weapons, no warning, only a line etched across its face in old Terran runes. We are not vengeance. We are correction. The Kex Dominions. Second moon shattered mid-orbit. No missile strike, no warning, just fracture, as though its composition had never made sense to begin with, like a code debugged after eons. The moon had been hollow, not from mining, from design. Within it, they found an archive, human origin, dating to before the Kex Dominion existed. Impossible, muttered Chief Historian Carrick. The last entry was a schematic of the Kex Dominion's entire neural warfare doctrine. Filed under, test subjects, Phase 3, complete, at the spire. Of vaulted stars, the slurry High Warden met with his conclave in darkness. They could not turn the lights on. Not since the last pulse, because light, now, triggered awakening codes in their own architecture. Why is this happening? The warden whispered, voice hoarse. His engineer wept. Because the spires were never ours. The humans built them first, or buried what did. Someone laughed then, softly, bitterly, from the far corner of the chamber. It was a human diplomat, presumed dead 2 decades ago. He stepped into the dark, eyes reflecting the vaults. You wore our bones like armor, he said, and now you choke on the marrow. Orbiting the shattered ring world of Therax End, Commander Isaac Merrill stood alone in his exosuit, drifting among the ruins. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't proud. He was confirming. The structure had failed centuries ago, but not from damage. It had failed because humanity had reprogrammed the physics constraints it depended on. They'd simply changed the rules. The ruins themselves were now living record, an ecosystem of entropy engineered by exiled minds. And in the center, a statue of a human child holding a seed. On Kareth Prime, the High Priest summoned divine wrath against the Earthshade. They called it heresy, a phantom disease, a great lie, but their sacred texts began rewriting themselves mid-sermon. Pages bled ink. Statues melted into human forms, and the temple's central tower began to hum with old music, Terran hymns encrypted in cosmic background radiation. The sky above flashed once. Then they received it, an open letter, signed simply, The Architects. Of memory, somewhere beneath the ruined poles of Pluto, a human AI blinked. It was once a child. Now, it was the anchor. All pathways active, it whispered. The lie has collapsed. Its final broadcast triggered something not meant for sound, resonance, the kind that undoes history with truth. Across every species, a new phrase began slipping into thought streams, into art, into panic. They were not the monsters. They were the mapmakers, and we ignored the warnings. A galactic-wide event called the Pulse finally strikes, but instead of destruction, it forces every species to confront its forgotten history, war crimes, and betrayals. Entire empires fracture under the weight of revealed truths. Humanity doesn't attack, they just make everyone remember. It began at Zo 317 Galactic Standard, not with fire, not with fleets, but with a silence that turned the stars inward, across and thousands of systems machines paused. Translators glitched, neural implants locked in place, leaving sentience frozen mid-sentence. They called it the Pulse. But it wasn't a signal, it was a permission. On the throne world of the Virelian Pact, the Empress staggered as her palace shimmered, not visibly but in perception. The gold was still gold, the walls intact, but now she understood, beneath every brick was a corpse, a civilization crushed, histories rewritten to glorify her lineage, and humanity hadn't lifted a weapon to show it, they'd only revealed the mirrors. In the war academies of the Jalari Starborn, students screamed as their curriculum restructured mid-lesson. Their recorded history recompiled itself, revealing the truth. Jalari command doctrines were built atop shattered Earth naval codes, rebranded, stolen, then taught as original, every tactic, every maneuver copied, repurposed, taught as if the Jalari had invented them. The Pulse didn't erase their pride, it inverted it. In the ruins of Orbital Bastion 9, Admiral Ray Delgado floated above the memory altar. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. Their whole strategy, she said to the last two surviving command officers, was to build their civilizations on our graves. Commander Merrill, bruised but calm, replied, "And we didn't claw back the land. We turned the graves into mirrors," Ray whispered, "and lit the galaxy with them. On a minor Kex outpost in Sector Dra 14, a conscript named Kelshi fell to her knees. Her vision was flooded with impossible memories, cities she'd never seen. Starfields labeled in human notation, screams in English, love songs in Dead Earth dialects. She tore at her uniform. I don't know who I am anymore." Her superior officer leaned close, shaking. "None of us ever did." On the surface of abandoned Earth, the sky shimmered as satellite mirrors realigned. They did not transmit commands. They reflected every major capital in the galaxy received a final, single-band, plain text transmission. No encryption, no protocol, just truth. You feared monsters. We became architects. You demanded silence. We became your conscience. In the Galactic Council's emergency chamber, hundreds of species screamed over each other, demanding control, answers, defense. Then she appeared, not human, not alive, the ghost girl. She flickered into every system as if born from static, skin like pale circuitry, eyes hollow, voice gentle. "This is your reckoning, not of war, but of memory. We are the final consequence of forgetting. You can't do this." The Raxi warlord shouted. Her smile was not cruel, we already did. The question is, can you live with it? And just like that, she vanished, leaving every species alone, not with enemies, with themselves, because the Pulse wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror, and humanity simply let the galaxy look. The fallout of the Pulse intensifies as shattered empires scramble to contain unrest. Ancient truths rise like ghosts from forbidden archives. Humanity doesn't strike, they simply open old vaults. Now, entire civilizations fracture under their own suppressed crimes. In the chamber of the Drenari Crown Code, High Primer Lash knelt before the throne of her ancestors, only to watch it crumble to ash in her hands, not metaphorically, literally. The alloy structure vaporized as dormant nanites, long thought ceremonial, reactivated with the pulses. Echo. Glyphs once carved in praise rearranged themselves. Now they read, property of the human expansion epoch. Confiscated by subject species 44, awaiting judgment. A lash tried to scream. The throne was older than Drenari civilization itself, and it had never belonged to them. On the shattered moon archives of Vela Kos, an alien archivist named Soro made the mistake of reading further. Every forbidden book unsealed, every classified algorithm unlocked, and every page, every file pointed backward to Earth. Soro's 3 hearts trembled as she decoded the master phrase beneath all the layers. They knew, and we hid it. Now we live in borrowed time. In orbit above New Carthage, Admiral Delgado watched a fleet collapse inward. No shots fired. The ship's AIs, quietly infected over decades, responded not to intrusion, but to reminder. Each vessel self-evaluated its own war crimes, and then erased itself. Not punishment, just protocol. Because buried beneath every copied Terran design was a line of code the galaxy had never decrypted. If truth, ignored, self-delete. On Elthera Prime, crowds gathered outside the Hall of Colonial Honor. When the pulse arrived, the names etched in golden steel rewrote themselves in front of the public. They were no longer heroes of Elthera's independence. They were executioners of a Terran refugee colony. The crowd rioted, then fell silent, then stared. The silence was worse, because it wasn't human retribution, it was self-recognition. In the Calri Nebula, an alien scientist finally located the fabled first lens, a black cube hidden in a drifting anomaly. She activated it alone and saw, in sequence, the real colonization of the stars by humans, their betrayal, the silence after. Then, the final image, a star map with one word superimposed over the galactic core: return. Commander Merrill stood on a dead satellite orbiting Jupiter. It had just activated for the first time in 600 years. A signal blinked in Morse. We buried nothing. We simply waited for the galaxy to grow arrogant enough to remember us wrong. He sighed. This was never revenge. Ray Delgado's voice echoed through the channel. Then what was it? Correction, he said. Memory. We gave them truth, and they were allergic to it. The galaxy didn't collapse from war. It collapsed from awakening, and humanity didn't rise again. They just opened the door and let the past walk in. The vaults are open. The myths are real. No warships needed, no demands made, just a galaxy, choking on truths it once erased. Let the empires burn in shame. Let the monuments crumble under reclassified memory. Let the stars whisper what every species tried to forget. Earth never disappeared. You just stopped looking, because you were guilty. Now we're not coming. We're not watching. We're not angry. We're done. And we left the door open behind us.